How can we seek remembrance in a city that lived 15 years of war and 28 years of post-war amnesia? How can violence be remembered in order to it being forgotten eventually? How can we remember violence so that we never fall into its trap again? I was 7 years old when the civil war broke in Lebanon. I had no memories of Baraka Square, but my parents told me lots of stories about Cinema Rivoli, Roxy, Rialto, the Parisiana, the Automatique, even the tramway, the police station, and of course, Marika's red light district. But I knew nothing about it. In 1990, the war ended, or so they said. I had graduated that year from the American University of Beirut as an architect. Architects dream of building the city. We dreamt of building our downtown. But then the Solidar project came, a real estate company took over, we were left out. The middle of Beirut during the war was, Baraka Square was a fighting arena. It was the beginning of the Green Line that divided the city into east and west, all along Damascus Road, all into the National Museum and beyond. It was a green line, literally. Green because the trees grew in the asphalt. The trees grew where life went away. When human life is absent, nature takes over. This was Damascus Road in 1990, right after the war. It was a reminder of a no man's land, a place where people killed each other, fought with each other. I lived that war, I don't know why until now. Unfortunately, the Solidar project took into consideration profit and not collective memory and identity. Downtown was bulldozed. Its buildings were dynamited. This is Rivoli being dynamited because it was structurally viable, but they didn't want it because they wanted an open access to the sea that would bring much more money to the towers that will be built around Marty Square. But Marty Square was not there anymore. Marty Square was flattened, totally. This was Marty Square in 1994. When I saw it, I was shocked. There was no reference. As an architect, I couldn't know, where am I? Where is Marty Square? There was nothing left of it except the martyr statue with its dismembered arm, the only painful reminder of that painful part of our history. That day, I decided, when I saw the flattened Marty Square, I decided I should walk the Green Line. I turned around, walked the Green Line. The Green Line was full of buildings like this, buildings that smelled of war still. After 4 years of the end of war, it smelled of war. The buildings were bullet-ridden, war-torn, squatted in, lines of laundry haphazardly over the broken concrete slabs, water trickling from open pipes, shrubs that are growing out of broken concrete edges. It was war until I reached the Sodico intersection. And there I saw this beautiful yellow building that commanded the intersection, that had yellow stone that reflected the Mediterranean sunlight in an amazing way, that had an opening in the middle. Through the colonnade and through the central atrium, you could see the blue sky. For me, it was hope. I'm an architect. I was amazed by the way this building was built. What is this void behind the colonnade? What is it doing? Why is it dividing the building so much? And to me, the two corner balconies were connected with this thin flying beam with a balustrade, with a handrail on top. Handrail for whom? For the void. Hiding what? The division. It was our community, our society, our country, exactly like this. Divided, trying to imply unity at every occasion until today. The void was bigger than the unity. It was built in 1924, I learned later. It was named the Baraka Building. It was built by Yusuf Eftimos, a famous Ottoman architect of Sultan Abdulhamid II, a very happy building before the war. What's amazing about it is that this void made every building every room in this building connected to the front street. Even if you are 6 rooms to the back, you have a visual axis that connects you to the front through carefully aligned openings, through the central void, and through the colonnaded balconies. So the void was a connecting void, not a disconnecting void. You could see the city as you walk through the building in so many different ways, an amazing avant-garde architectural gem of architectural transparency and visual connectivity that until today is considered a masterpiece. The building lived the heydays, the golden days, the happy days of Beirut. The Barakats lived in it happily until 1975. This building that was designed with a void disconnecting it and dividing it into 2 was destined to become on the green line that divided the city into 2. The genius of the architect that created visual axes to connect people to the city was abused by the snipers and the fighters who sat protected by the architecture in the 6, 7 rooms back and used the same visual axes to kill people in the city, to disconnect the city. It was on the green line, and this green, huge ficus tree took over the same way. It's still the only reminder of the green line today in Beirut. It was supposed to be a small tree that decorates the sidewalk, to be pruned every few months so that it still becomes this little tree that you see on the sidewalks. It took over, covered the whole building. It actually healed the building the way when people left the building, the tree took over. In the building, 22 killing locations were installed. The fighters did their own war architecture inside the architecture of the building. They built walls that are at least 2 meters deep. They have fair-faced concrete walls, layered sandbags with cement on them, and then they place their wooden killing boxes at appropriate, carefully aligned angles and heights so that they command the intersection and no one can pass without being killed from one of these 22 locations. These traces of the war, these are not an installation, an art installation. These were made by the war, by the actors of war, and they feel, when you go in, you feel it's an art installation, but no, it's a place where death happened, where lives were changed. From this building, people killed. From this building, people were killed. From this building, lives were changed. From this building, the city was changed. This building should stay as a museum of memory of the city. When I stood for the first time behind this square hole where bullets were shot, I immediately remembered the war because I lived every minute of it. I was in Beirut and never left. I remembered as a child when I crawled under our dining table because I thought when the bombs were falling, this thick dining table of wood would really protect me. I would drag my mother down with me, sit with me because I'm protecting you. I'm protecting my mother with a wooden dining table. But then I remember her voice as the bombs kept falling and the deafening sound of them was frightening me and I was crying. She would say, "Do not cry. If you hear it, it will not kill you because it had just passed." How can a child reckon with these notions? But then I would waste the time, pass the time looking at her eyes in the dark, no electricity, under the table. Are they green or blue? I knew they were colored, but I thought if she leaves, if something happens to her, I want to know. I have to know. If I remembered all this just because I stood there, I was sure, today I am sure, a girl in Syria or in Yemen or was in Bosnia or in Afghanistan or even in Vietnam must have had the same feelings because war is the same, loss is the same, fear is the same all over the world. So this is not a museum of memory just for me. It's a museum of memory for everybody, for the world. opening through which the bullet passed was now the only source of light. But it was also a painful reminder. The light moves slowly through the walls as it enters back from the bullet hole square opening and reminds us of that painful history. After the war, when I entered in 1994, I discovered the architecture, then the war. And then I went to the first floor east apartment. And there was the first name I read, الدكتور نجيب شمالي جراح في طب الأسنان. Dr. Najib Shimali, chirurgien dentiste. I entered that door. And when I entered, I didn't know that this will be the story of my life for the next 24 years. On the floor, when I entered, my foot sank into a thick layer of documents, clothes, newspapers, visiting cards, photographs, everything you had in your life falling on top of each other. People took the sofas, the things they could sell. They're not interested in documents. They're not interested in old clothes. They were all there. It was like an archaeological dig, an archaeological site. I was there. He was a dentist, but he performed out of his clinic, was in his apartment, so the chair was still there in the clinic. Every medicine bottle he used, every document of every tooth he had ever fixed was there. He was a meticulous documentary archivist, and I was there to collect it after him. I was there to put the pieces together, to know about the life of a person I've never heard about before, just from the building. I refused to ask about him until today. I refused to ask about him because it wasn't, for me, I didn't want to know who is Najib Shmali. I wanted to know how the building was telling me the story, how a building can actually reconstruct a life, a forgotten life. I spent, since 1994 until 2008, until they cleaned the building, every Sunday of my life picking up documents, taking people to visit the building to lobby for its preservation. I found photographs. I found everything that his children from a boarding school wrote him letters in the 20s. He wrote love letters. He received love letters from Dora Polizevic in Italy during the World War. He had cocktails in his apartment, and he kept every bottle they consumed. So I have the first Ksara Rosé, the first Leziza, the first Almaza, and the 7-Up, تحبها تحبك. He kept every postcard of every actor he liked. He went to every cinema in Beirut and kept every brochure of every film he saw. Every film. In cinemas like Majestic, Royal, Opera, Empire, Grand Théâtre, most of these were flattened by Solidaire to open up for the new, fresh plans and to kill the identity of the city. The other archive I found was on the ground floor. The only other archive on the ground floor shop was Photo Mario. Photo Mario was a shop that was closed by a rusty metal shutter, and nobody could enter. I forced myself in, and then on the floor, under the debris, I found more than 8,000 negatives. Not one single photograph, only negatives. The negatives are of portraits of people who came to the studio before the war and took their photographs. Men, women, children, girls, boys, family portraits. They were all looking at me with white eyes because the negative reverses things. And those were like looking at me and saying, do you know our story? Do you want to know more stories about us? And I didn't know what to do. Recently, I decided to be courageous enough and to put 80 of these. I developed 80 of these negatives with the support of AFAQ and the technical help of the Arab Image Foundation. We cleaned the negatives and we saw the people. 80 of these negatives are now displayed in the building, and it will be a permanent display and always updating with more and more negatives to get more and more stories. If you pass by today on the street, in the vitrines of the shops, you can see those faces looking now at you with the real eyes. 9 of these people have come forward and said, "This is us." They are 46 years older. This is a photo of a family who went to the studio to take their Palm Sunday photograph. Holding their candles, I didn't know that I will meet Claude and Jocelyn Chakal, who are the 2 younger girls in this photograph. They told us stories, beautiful stories, not about them only, about the city, about how they used to leave their house on Monroe Street and go climb up the stairs in Photo Mario and be forced every Palm Sunday to take a photograph. In 1997, after 3 years of me knowing this building, taking all my friends, all the people I ever knew to visit my little secret, I was passing by at around 6:30 in the evening. I look at the building, which was always like my little baby, and I saw something had changed. I stopped the car, looked again. The handrails were not there. The balconies had no handrails. I walked into the building, I walked into the backyard, and I saw that every aluminum, every metal frame, every piece of wood, every piece of stone, every Art Deco colored tile was dismantled, and there was a demolition permit that said the building is due to demolition. I went crazy because I felt immediately that I had a baby and they were taking it away from me. I ran to every person who had ever visited the building with me. I lobbied with activists, I lobbied with people, I went to the Muhafiz, I went to the municipality, I went to the Minister of Culture, I went to every TV that accepted to interview me, to every news agency, local, international, to every newspaper. I did everything I could for years. I did tours, I did exhibitions, I printed postcards, I printed posters. I went all over the city because for me, this was Beirut encapsulated in a building, and it cannot go. The collective memory that this building had was too precious to be sold for a few million to build just a building. It took me 6 years to convince the municipality to expropriate the building, 5 years to convince them that it becomes a museum of memory and to keep the traces of the war, together with the municipality of Paris as a technical supporter, and a very nice scientific committee of volunteers who loved the project and supported me. Another 6 years to actually renovate the building architecturally, and today we stand in front of Beit Beirut. It's not yet the museum I dream of. Today, I am 50 years old. I have one son, 8 years old, called Yazan, and one daughter, 24 years old, called the Baraka Building. I will not stop until this building becomes the museum of memory for the city. A museum of memory open not only for exhibition, open as a museum with a curatorial policy, with a vision, open for the people to share their stories of the past, to share their dreams of the future, to share with me their stories and with you and with every single person who lives in this country, so that the country has a memory. Against the greed and against the amnesia that is sweeping our city, this will be a reminder that if you preserve your memory, you create a generation that will preserve their city for the future. We have also to preserve the memory of the war so that we never, ever fall into its trap again. Thank you.